All right, so this is what, the second week? The second week of our Pressure Points study in James. And today I'm going to be talking about the lure of sin. And so I've got James chapter 1, verses 13 through 18. It says, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Of his own will he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creation. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one." God doesn't tempt us. God can't tempt us. And when you read that, it's like God does not tempt us to sin. God does not tempt us to evil. God will not cause you to sin. God will not cause you to do evil. But that doesn't stop us from trying to blame God, right? We, as the human beings, have a tendency to try to shift blame all the way to the beginning. If you look at the story in Genesis of Adam and Eve, you know what we call the fall. Eve was having a discussion with the serpent, which I'm not really sure why you would talk to a snake, but he convinced her that it was good. And then as a couple, Adam and Eve decided, hey, we're going to eat this. This is a good thing. Listen, I know a lot of times, people try to place the blame on the woman. That was a collaborative effort. Adam's like, yeah, dude, that's cool. He was probably right there. He wasn't off at work or nothing. He didn't have a job. He wasn't anywhere. So, but when God shows up and God's like, yo, what's going on? And Adam's like, it was her fault. Right away, dude, he throws Eve under the bus. Come on, man. And then, so God looks at Eve and Eve's like, it was a snake. We as humans have a tendency to try to cast blame. And so we're like, God, why are you tempting me? Even in Matthew chapter 7, verse 3, it says, why do you see the speck in your brother's eyes and not the log in your own? We tend to try to deflect blame. We tend to try to deflect fault and not take ownership of that. So, and if you have kids or you've been around kids, that is something that is in humans from birth. That's not a taught thing. That's oh, well, Jace made me do this. I'm talking about my kids. Oh, but Colt did this first. Those are my boys' names. It's in our human nature to try to kind of push blame onto something else. So God does not tempt us, but that doesn't mean he won't test us, right? God may put us in situations where we have to learn to really rely on him and trust him. Damon and I were having a conversation this morning out preaching. He and I are in the same boat. There's times where I'm like, God, I need you to show up because I can't do this. I can't do this alone. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not well-read enough. And so God will put you in situations where you learn to trust and lean on him. I think about Abraham and Isaac in the story in Genesis when God tells Abraham, take your son up and offer as a burnt offering. And God ends up providing an offering in Isaac's place. And in that moment, Abraham is learning a lot about who God is. He's learning he can trust God. He's learning that God is his provider and God will always be there. And God's not going to ask him to do something that would break his heart, right? So, temptation can and will bring destruction upon us. Like it says in verse 15, but a test will strengthen us. A test will sharpen us, will let us know more about who God is and who we are, and learn more about the character of God and how much we can trust him. Those tests help sharpen us. Those tests help us become more Christ-like. Those tests help us hear God's voice. It continues on, it says, but each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. See, the lure or temptation will trigger a response in us, right? This week, Dr. E and I were talking, and he was making a joke like, oh, you're going to use a fishing lure reference? And really, if you think about it, it works. Like, listen, like, track with me here. So a fishing lure is designed to trigger or solicit a response from the fish. The first one is the obvious, it's food. You know, your lure looks like a little fish kind of struggling to swim along. It looks like a fly. It looks like a larva. It looks like a frog. Looks like a crawfish. Like, these lures are designed to mimic things that the fish wants and needs. The next one isn't quite so obvious, but like a fishing lure will also solicit like an anger or fear response. So like, I grew up fishing in South Texas. We fished like ponds, lakes, rivers. We fished the Gulf. You know, bass specifically, they like to hide in these areas. Like if you're in a lake and you want to fish for bass, you don't go through the middle. You go to the edges. Like there's like trees and roots and the bank, and like sometimes there's these little caves, and they'll hide in here. And if you put a lure in the right spot and send it past that fish, he doesn't have to be hungry to bite it. That might just make him angry. Like you're there in his area and he's just defending his area. And so this lure is going to solicit some type of response, like an anger or territorial response. If you're a hunter, like you'll see hunters out hunting elk during the rut. They'll bugle like a bull elk bugle, and when another elk hears that, it triggers a response in him and he gets mad. Or they'll do like a cow bleat and they'll be like, oh, hey, it's mating season. I'm going to go find this cow over here, and then he ends up getting shot because the bulls are dumb. Really, like, across all species, the men tend to be kind of dumb. And we get ourselves in trouble when we're not. Anyway, I'm just going to keep going. And so sometimes all the lure has to be is shiny and fast moving. And so if it's like one of those little spoons and it goes past and like the fish will bite it, it's just a triggered response. And I say, the fisherman knows more about what the fish wants than the fish does. Wow. Like a fly fisherman, he has this box of flies, and he'll go to the creek that he wants to fish, and he'll turn over a rock and see what comes up, and he'll see what the fish are eating that day. And he'll go through his little box and say, oh, they're eating something that looks like this, and he'll use this, and he'll start bringing them in all day long. You see, the enemy knows what your triggers are. The enemy knows, Satan knows how to trigger a response in you. He knows how to put something in front of you, and you're going to react to it without even knowing. Whether it's lust, whether it's anger, whether it's fear, whether it's just loneliness, whatever it is, like Satan knows what to put in front of you to trigger this response in your life. And it's like this, it's this desire that comes out from underneath you. You know, it says in there, it says, enticed by his own desires in verse 14. So those triggers, that response, that's what triggers you into temptation. That's what triggers you into sin. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8 says, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. See, he's trying to draw you out of safety. Like when you're fishing for bass, you're bringing that lure right along to try to get that bass out of his like little hiding spot, out of his little comfort zone. When you're hunting elk or whatever, you're trying to call them out of where they're hiding. See, Satan does the same thing. He puts something out there to entice you, to get you out of your comfort zone, to get you out of your safe area, to get you out of your right mind and trigger a response in you. And these triggers and temptations, they work on us for a few different reasons. One of the reasons is they're easy. Things that are healthy take work, hard work, relationships, a job, eating and staying healthy. All that requires work. And sometimes when we're weak and we're low, we're looking for something that's just easy. You know, there's an old saying, the straight and narrow path or the wide and windy path. That straight and narrow path is hard to stay on, but that wide and windy, you've got plenty of room, your homies can come along, and, so things that are healthy take work. Dr. Kelso, former chief investigator of Sacred Heart Hospital in California, once said, nothing worth having comes easy. We can be triggered into a response just because something is easy. Another reason these triggers work is they're an escape. Sometimes, when we're lower, we're looking for something to just kind of comfort us, whether it's a website, a chemical, a drink, a coworker that we probably shouldn't be flirting with, right? It's just an escape to escape our own thoughts. So these triggers work on us because they kind of allow us to escape. And, oftentimes we're trying to escape a feeling of shame or fear or anger. And the other thing is, sometimes they're just exciting. Kind of like a cat chasing a laser on the floor or a fish going after a shiny lure. Sometimes it's the rush of the moment. Stealing that item from a store, flirting with a coworker. Whatever it may be, sometimes there's this excitement that comes with it. I think of the story of David and Bathsheba. If you go back and read the story of David and Bathsheba, David ends up in a place he shouldn't have been, at a time he shouldn't have been there, because he knew he'd see something he shouldn't see. Wow. And it puts him on this path. It opens this door for him, and it's bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. I heard this story a while back of this little boy, not my little boys, but this little boy, probably 4 or 5 years old, and this is back when garage door openers weren't quite as safe as they are now. And so the kids, they'd hit the garage door opener, run, and they'd grab the garage door, and they'd let it pull them up, and they'd let go and they fall. Well, this one particular little boy saw his siblings do it, and he grabs hold of that door, and it's going up, and all of a sudden his feet are off the ground. And then all of a sudden he's higher, and he's higher, and he's higher. And next thing you know, he's hanging onto this garage opener, he's in the air, and he's just screaming. And his dad has to come out and rescue him. Folks, sometimes we grab hold of something that we shouldn't have, and we hold on so long that letting go feels wrong. Wow. We do that with our choices sometimes. Sometimes we get so caught up in our choices. If you look, continuing on in verse 15, it says, "Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin. Then sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death." Just like David and Bathsheba, one bad choice led to another, led to another, led to another. Have you guys been there where you just feel like you can't make a good choice? You feel like everything you do is a bad choice, and that just leads you to another bad choice. And next thing you know, you feel like you're trying to run in peanut butter. You can't go anywhere. It's like your feet are moving, you're not getting any traction, you're slipping, your feet are sticking, or, back home in South Texas, the mud there is thick, and we call it gumbo mud. It's like this clay mud that sticks to everything, and if you're in it in your vehicle, it sticks to your tires, it doesn't come off, and next thing you know, you're going slower and slower, and your vehicle eventually gets stuck. And then you try to get out, and you're trying to hike back to the road to go find help, and the mud is sticking to your shoes. Next thing you know, your socks are in there, and you're drudging through this mud barefoot because it's so sticky and goopy, and it's just grabbing hold of you. Our decisions can be that way. It's just one bad choice after another, and we have a hard time getting out of it. Do you guys know who the actor Terry Crews is? He's on that hit crime show Brooklyn Nine-Nine that I'm currently watching, and I love it so much. Anyway, so he has this video out. It's been a while back, and he was talking about his own addiction and his own struggle with porn, and how he was saying, the more he tried to keep it secret, the more power it had over his life. And that he didn't find healing and recovery until he found a group of men that he could be honest and open with and get that out in the open. So, because sin kept in secret keeps its power. And when we bring it into an open space, it loses its power over us. And again, I think of the story of just David and Bathsheba. David making bad decision after bad decision, and ultimately that all had to come out to light. And he had to face the consequences of his actions. It couldn't stay hidden forever. It can't stay hidden forever. But you guys, let me tell you something. You are in a safe place. God is not desiring for you to feel alone or for you to wear this mask of shame and hide these sin. The people around you are safe. We want to go, and you're not alone. I remember Dr. E does this exercise at men's retreats where he has men fill out a survey of different things, and then they wad it up and they put it in a hat and you mix it up, and then everybody takes one, and it's not their own paper they're representing, but you stand up to represent these different things, and all of a sudden you're looking around the room going, I thought I was the only one struggling with that. but most of the men in here are struggling with the same thing. So when you try to keep that secret, it's going to keep its power over your life. But if you can find someone you trust to bring that out in the open, that's when healing and that's when recovery starts happening. That's when those triggers stop working so much. Because the good news is, folks, we are a new creation. Continue on, it says in verse 16, it says, "Do not be deceived, my beloved brothers, for every good and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Of his own will he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we should be kind of a first fruits of his creation." God can and will change our nature. He will change our desires. He will change our hearts, so that we desire him and not the things that will lead us into destruction. It says, brought forth by the word of truth. We are, as a new creation, reborn into his kingdom, that we may not be tempted by the lures of Satan. Romans chapter 12, verse 2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." Ephesians chapter 4, verses 22 through 24 says, "Put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires," there's that word again, "and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness." And 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17 says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation." Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Amen. The old has passed away, behold, the new has come. Folks, that is great, great news. Like, if we're in this pattern of just getting stuck in these bad decisions, there is grace and mercy and forgiveness and hope and freedom in Jesus Christ to leave those decisions behind, to leave that sin behind, to leave those temptations behind, and to desire the things of God, not desire the things you used to. Are we going to slip up every now and then? Is our old version going to rear its head and those old temptations and triggers going to bite hold? People from our past life, people from not that long ago that we're trying to cut out because we're trying to live differently. The answer is yes. Even Paul in Romans chapter 7, verse 15 says, "For I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate." The worship team's going to come back up, and are you guys going to play, or are we doing karaoke? So, the worship team's going to come back up, and while they're playing this last song, I want to encourage you guys. Those decisions, we don't have to fall into that downward spiral. We don't have to be triggered by temptation and desire anymore. Your choices do not define you. Your sin does not define you. Your triggers do not define you. What defines you is you are a child of God. And there is freedom and hope and forgiveness in that. And so while they're playing their last song, I want to kind of open it up. If you need prayer, you can come to the cross, or you can come see our prayer team. If you're at home online, if you want someone to pray with you, you can post in the comments. I would encourage you, you can just even, it's not weird. You can just kind of kneel there in your living room, sit on the couch, just kind of get in a place where you can be with God. But if you have never experienced this freedom in your life, it's not a complicated recipe. You just have to say, "Jesus, I'm broken. I need something, and I don't know what that is. Be with me. Live with me. Fill my heart. Fill my mind. Fill my soul. Fill my life with your love and your forgiveness and your freedom." Or if you've been walking in, man, you've known Jesus for a while, but man, those old habits keep creeping up. Those old triggers keep triggering you. Man, if that's you today, find someone to pray with. Come up here. We'll do our best to be socially distanced. Like, if you want someone to pray with you, maybe kneel over here, and we'll. If you kneel, we won't pray with you. We'll kind of keep our distance. But if you stand, someone will come behind you and maybe just lay their hand on your shoulder. But folks, there is freedom today. You don't have to be triggered anymore. Your triggers can be hope. Your trigger can be freedom. Your trigger can be grace. Your trigger is Jesus now. All right, so they're going to sing, we're going to pray, And yeah, love you guys.
Thanks for tuning in to a message from the Sanctuary Church. For more information and media, go to our website at thesanctuarywestside.org or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube.